PineGap is a US-Australian joint defence facility in the depths of the central Australian desert. In 2005, despite it being the most secure base in the country, 4 Christian pacifists managed to break in.
PineGap is one of a handful of US military bases in Australia. PineGap is the most significant of those bases. It's a satellite receiving station, gathers intelligence. It's part of the Star Wars system. PineGap is involved very much in the war in Iraq in terms of gathering military intelligence for missiles, monitoring of troops, of terrain, of the countries that America is at war with.
We're all Australian citizens here, and can we please speak to whoever is in charge of access to this base?
We have not a right but an obligation as good citizens to expose PineGap. We're going to say we didn't go to PineGap to commit a crime but to expose a crime.
It was a starry sky and we walked for about 5 hours through the bush at a very fast pace.
We got to a hill and we could see PineGap in the distance.
I saw that there was a way up onto the roof, so I just went for the roof and Jim followed me.
And then the security arrived and I said, no, we're not going to get down until the commander of the base gives us written permission to continue. And I got down on my knees and prayed for non-cooperation with the terrorism of the base.
It takes so few of us to stand up, and so I just thought I'd be one of them, that's all.
And so the base was on high alert. 2 people had penetrated deep into the base, there was an arrest, and all alarms were on.
Excuse me, everyone, I have a brief announcement to make. Jesus was black, Ronald Reagan was the devil, and the government is lying about 9/11.
What's happening in Australia is part of a much wider picture, and it's very, very much to do with everything that the United States has been doing to reorganise what it calls its global military posture. Partly the end of the Cold War and the replacement of the Soviet Union by other enemies, in particular preparing for a containment of China, but equally, of course, a shift to the war in the Middle East, the war which now runs from pretty much from the Syrian border to the Indian-Pakistan border. And what I want to do is speak very briefly about the ways in which Australia at the moment is connecting to this wider pattern, and then narrow down to talk about the way in which PineGap, as the largest, most important military base in Australia, intelligence base, the way it connects us to this wider pattern of warfare that we're involved in at the moment, and that in a sense sets the wider pattern of struggle for peace movements in this country and internationally. Of course, there are very many bases in Australia. There are very many that have got some connection with the United States. This is Codgerina, just in from the coastline of Western Australia. It's a very substantial Australian defence satellite communication satellite station. It's basically our part of the so-called echelon system. Inside those domes, there are large satellite dishes which are pointing to particular parts of the sky, and in particular to be downlinks from satellites that the United States has stationed mainly in this case over the Indian Ocean. And the point about this in the United States, this is an Australian station, but just last year I should say, the government, the Howard government announced that there will be 3 new dishes here in a slightly separate part of the facility which will be entirely staff controlled by the United States as part of a military mobile phone network. And of course, as we use mobile phones, so do they. But the second thing which is completely new is a joint combined training centre.
Service members from 15 countries came together to kick off Pacific Endeavour 2009.
And this year marks the first time in 5 years that countries from all over the world have come together for Pacific Endeavour to test their communication.
This is part of a new, much more highly integrated system which the United States has initiated and Australia has joined in, and certainly Japan is very, very much part of this now. It's part of a much wider network. Delamere is about 500,000 hectares. It's huge. It's very, very big. It has a very particular connection to Guam. For 3 years in a row, B-52s and B-2s flying out of Anderson Airfield in Guam have flown non-stop with aerial refuelling to Delamere, dropped huge numbers of bombs on the weapons range for training, quote-unquote, done exercises with Australian fighters, with Australian refuelling aircraft, and then gone back. So that's just one example of this way in which we're integrated. Interoperability sounds like one of those military speak words. What it means is, how do you make sure that when push comes to military shove, that people can work together, the equipment fits together.
The Australian soldiers have been attached to the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit's Battalion Landing Team for exercise Talisman Sabre.
The whole point of large-scale exercise like this is the interoperability between our different nations, and we can certainly learn from the Marines' experience and hopefully vice versa.